Hello everybody and welcome to a video that I've debated about making for a while. Now, when I made my last video on beginner level puzzles, I claimed that it was the end of the puzzle solving series, but I've gotten a lot of requests to do a video where I essentially solve Grandmaster level puzzles, where I show everybody what puzzles at my level actually look like. And I've decided to listen, and so in this video I'll be solving what I believe to be approximately Grandmaster level puzzles or Master level puzzles. Why did I hesitate before making this video? Well, there are sort of two very specific logistical concerns that I'm going to put out on the table and warn you about. The first is that some of these exercises, and as you can see, I've set the range to be 2750 to 3100, which I think is approximately accurate. Some of these might be easier, some of these might be harder, but don't nitpick. But with some of the harder exercises, they require a tremendous amount of visualization and sometimes long 5-6 move variations. And I was worried that it might be hard for some people to follow and benefit from the videos, which of course is the ultimate goal. So what I've done to try to remedy that, I've opened up chess space. And if we get a puzzle that I feel like requires a lot of visualization, I am going to reproduce the position on chess space so that we can actually move the pieces and I can walk you through my thinking while moving the pieces. And I'm technically, that would not be something I normally do. I normally try to visualize everything, but that's a judgment call that I might make with some of the exercises. And the second thing that I want everybody to understand is that I might get some of these exercises wrong. And when I solve on this level, my accuracy is generally, I'd say, roughly 80 to 90%, so it's pretty high. But of course, I do come across puzzles that stump me, and sometimes I make dumb mistakes. So I feel like there's this misconception that grandmasters hold the keys to the kingdom, and all these exercises come easy to me, and I'm not sure if this will make you happy or sad, but that's totally untrue. And what I've been doing in the previous videos, the process that I've been going through is not just me dumbing it down. That's what I actually do when I solve exercises at this level, as you're going to see. It's just that some of the observations that you have to make, some of the lines you have to calculate are more complicated. So there's a possibility that I'll get stumped, or that I'll have to spend some time thinking in silence, or that I'll get a problem wrong. And I'm not ashamed of that. That's just something that happens. I want to give you the genuine experience. I'm not going to edit anything out. Again, I hope that gives you a more realistic take on how puzzle solving looks at my level, which is basically exactly the same as puzzle solving on any level. So with that behind us, let's jump in and see what we're going to get. Okay. Isn't this just a mate in one? Okay, this is a really funny... I think I set the range to be 2750. Rook f2 is just mate. 2887. Okay, if these puzzles... If these are Grandmaster level puzzles, then I guess you all can become a Grandmaster. I suppose they thought the difficulty was that Black had a fork on g5, but I didn't even see that fork. I mean, this is a classic Arabian mate. That's hilarious. Okay, if we get any more of this, I'm going to set the range even higher. Wow, that might just be a misrated puzzle or something like that. Anyways, great start, guys. All right. Okay, so this seems like a more suitable one. All right, so it's Black to play. We're down a piece. We're down a piece. White's up a knight. Okay, but clearly the first thing I see is that we have doubled rooks here on the c file, and we can take the pawn on c2. That seems to be a very logical way to begin. But let's try to find the follow-up, right? Because you don't just want to guess. You want to limit the guessing that you do. You want to always find the follow-up, even when the first move seems obvious. So rook takes c2 check. The king is going to step aside to b1. Okay, and then we need to find a follow-up there. Well, we can't really take the bishop there. The queen defends the bishop. The queen also defends the knight. So white's queen is a little bit overloaded. That's one thing that I'm noticing here. So what about rook takes c2, king b1? Maybe we can just play it simple and take the pawn on f5 with the queen, hitting the knight. And if the knight moves away, then the queen has a direct line against white's king. So we're going to have some sort of a discovery, possibly checkmate. Are there any issues with that approach? So rook takes c2, king b1. Queen takes f5. Okay, so the question is, if white can't move the knight, can white defend the knight? Well, yes, white can defend the knight. There's this annoying move, bishop d3. And the problem there is that bishop hits the rook and it defends the knight. So we might have to move the rook back, and then we're still down a piece. So that doesn't seem entirely suitable. Okay, so if rook takes c2 doesn't work, let's go back to the initial position and, you know, marinate on this for a second. I need a moment here just to think about what to do in the initial position. I'm going to take maybe 30 seconds or so just to think about this, and then I'll share my observations. I found that sipping coffee is a good way to get the creative juices flowing. Okay, so there. Take c2, king moves. Queen a4. We can also go queen a4 here. I'm thinking about this move. But then the knight drops back to c3. Again, it seems like white is able to defend. Okay, so let's go back to rook takes c2. Rook takes c2. King b1. Let's look more carefully in that position. Can I find anything there? Boom, boom. Queen takes f5. Bishop d3. All right. I guess we could play something like rook c4 there. That doesn't smell like the solution, though. Okay, well, I think we're going to go for rook takes c2. And then we are going to think after king b1 is played. Sometimes getting the position a little bit closer can actually do wonders for your visualization. There's something there that I'm missing. The first move is correct. So there was something here that I am missing. What could it be? Now, we can take the knight. Okay, we can take the knight. We have to check the captures. That's what you always have to do. But then the queen takes the bishop. And what have we gained from the trade? I don't see anything. Okay, we can also take the bishop. Oh, we can take the bishop. Queen takes e2. And then we can play queen takes f5 and try to go after the knight. Well, white's probably going to defend the knight with rook g to e1. And then we can pick the knight off with d5. So that's an option. What's going to happen at the end of that after we win the knight? We're going to be down in exchange, but we are going to have 3 pawns for it. That, again, the metric for solving these exercises is higher than that. Black might be slightly better there. I don't think that's the solution. I have an idea. So I was looking at this knight and thinking, well, what other ways could we attack the knight? And I came up with, I think, what could be a very promising move. And that's, what if we just go completely the other direction? We go queen a4. We go queen a4. Now, how does that actually help? It hits the knight from a different side. It could seem that the knight just moves back to c3, right? Because we're not threatening a discovery anymore. But then we play rook takes c3. And white cannot take back with the pawn because he gets mated. Our queen on a4 captures on a2. So I feel like coming at the white king from this side is going to offer more attacking chances than what we just tried there. So let's try queen a4. I think that might be it. That's it. Okay, so f takes g6. And all right, so here I think we have forced mate, and this is just a pattern recognition thing. You might be tempted by taking the knight, but one of the things you see at this higher level is these exercises have a lot of false positive moves and a lot of tempting pieces that are lying by the side of the road, and you can't lose track of the goal. See, the problem with taking the knight here is that white's going to take on f7. It's going to be a double check, and look at black's king. It's going to be all exposed. Let's say queen takes e4, g takes f7, king f7, and rook f1 check. That seems really messy. Black's king gets tossed around the whole board. I don't think that's a good way to go. Plus, I think I see forced mate. We can play rook takes b2 check. And I think probably you see that in all the time I've spent blabbering. King takes rook is forced. The other rook comes into c2. The king has to go back to b1, and then the queen checkmates on a2. So rook takes b2, sort of clearing the defense. Boom, boom. And that was the 3,000 rated puzzle. The hard part here was queen a4. That was not an easy move to come up with. Just because my eyes were constantly drawn to the f5 pawn. I had this instinct to capture it, but after bishop d3, there was no follow-up. So I had to find other ways of accomplishing the same idea. And so I came up with the concept of physically positioning the queen closer to where the attack is. And that did the trick. All right, next. Ooh, this one's going to be juicy. I can already smell it. Because white is down a queen. Okay, down a queen. We have a rook. Black's king is in an ungodly spot. So my guess is this is going to be something where we try to checkmate, use the limited resources at our disposal to checkmate the black king. Probably with a rook somewhere on the b file. All right, so that's probably going to be the target position. I also see that black's queen, at least for the time being, is completely, excommunicated from the game. So we actually have time. Not every move needs to be a check. How do I know that? Well, I can see that black is not threatening anything, and black's king is not getting out anytime soon. In order to threaten something, the queen will have to move to h4. Then it's going to threaten checkmate on e1. So we have, at most, one tempo. We have one move that's not a check. So one thing we could try to do is set, for example, an unstoppable threat. And let's think about specific moves. I think we know what we want to try to do. We want to try to get this rook somewhere on this b file. We also have this f pawn, which we can push at some point, maybe to distract the bishop. Maybe the bishop will be blocking the rook somehow. How do we put that all together? Well, also, I wouldn't rule out the possibility that our bishop participates in the checkmating procedure. Okay, so let's think. The first idea that I have, just to get a feel for the position, if we go rook up to e8, well, there's a problem. That doesn't do anything, because the b8 square is protected by the bishop. Black is going to go queen h4. The rook actually does not have any direct way to get to one of these three squares, because rook e7 is going to be captured. Okay, so what if we promote? I have an idea. What if we promote, and then if the bishop takes the queen, okay, then we're going to go rook up to e6, and I don't think black's going to have a way to stop rook b6. But I see an issue with that logic. If we promote to a queen, amazingly, black does not have to take that queen, right? That queen from f8, if you look at it very carefully, is not threatening to go to b8, because that square is protected. I'm afraid that black can go queen h4, and despite white having a new queen, we're still not going to be able to stop black's queen from getting to e1. So that's a little bit worrisome. And so that leads me to another idea. Maybe, I mean, I saw in my mind's eye, quickly, I saw another mating position, possible mating position. Here's what I saw. Let's say, hypothetically, that this bishop from f3 is able to get to c6 and then capture the pawn on a4. The king will have to capture, and then our king slides over to a2. This is a pretty common mating pattern, using the king to push the pawn to b3, and that's going to keep black's king in a mating net. So if we can get our bishop to c6 quickly, it's going to be threatening bishop takes a4. Well, how can we do that? We'll have to move our rook. But we can't just move it anywhere. We have to move it to a square where black has to respond to the threat. So what if we move it to e7? What if we move it to e7? Move it to e7. Well, black will have to take it, right? Because we're threatening rook b7. Then we go bishop c6. One red flag is that I'm not sure how this pawn is involved yet, but maybe it's not. So rook e7, bishop takes e7, bishop c6. And I have a crazy claim for you. I don't think black can stop. Despite having the move, I don't think black can stop us from capturing on a4 and then playing king a2. Oh, he can. Oh, man. So rook e7, bishop takes e7, bishop c6, right? Black can try the old move, queen h4, but that doesn't help anymore. We play bishop takes a4. Bishop takes a4, king takes a4, king a2. And then we're threatening pawn b3 checkmate. And even if the queen slides into f2, notice that we have this pawn on e2 blocking the queen, so it's not a pin. We can push our b pawn. Now here's the issue. Rook e7 takes bishop c6. The black queen goes back to h8. And after bishop takes a4, king takes a4, king a2, we go queen b8. And unfortunately, the queen covers the b3 square. Okay, so we need to put, it's like the bad guys are heading to our house. We need to slay a tree. The tree has to be covering the road. Do we have such a tree at our disposal? Well, we do. We have the f pawn, right? What if we push it at the right moment, and force the bishop to take that pawn, and then black's queen is not going to be able to get to b8 anymore. Now, we already know that f8 queen here does not do the trick, because black is not going to respond. But what if we do it second? We play rook e7, black has to respond to that, then we promote to a queen. Now, already at this point, the queen is threatening to go to b8, because black's bishop is no longer covering that square. It's now on e7. It's captured a rook there. Okay, so rook e7, bishop takes c7, f8 equals queen. Black has to take that queen. Then we go bishop c6. And if black goes queen h8, the queen is going to meet that tree at the center of the road. The road's closed off. It can't come to b8. We play bishop takes a4, king takes a4, king a2. If that's the solution, that is one stunning exercise. So just to repeat one more time, we go rook e7 to distract the bishop and to open up our bishop. Then we go f8 equals queen, forcing the bishop back to f8 so that it blocks this passageway that the queen could take. Then we go bishop c6, and on pre-move, we play bishop takes a4, then king a2, and b3 checkmate. I'm pretty confident that that's the solution. Yep. Now we can't forget about this move. Yep. Bishop c6. They're trying queen h4, as you can see. Black is just one tempo behind. Boom, boom. And if you had trouble visualizing, maybe now you'll have an easier job seeing what the fuss was all about. Because pawn b3 is checkmate, and it's unstoppable. The king cannot evacuate to b5. There's a pawn there. Okay, so queen, let's finish it off, b3. And that's another 3,000 rated exercise. I would say maybe on par with the last one, but a different kind of hard. That's another thing that you see at this level is you see different kinds of hard exercises. The previous one forced us to find a quiet move. This one is a series of boom, boom, boom sacrifices, but we have to find the mating concept, which is really hard to spot. You know, this bishop c6, bishop takes a4 idea. Hard, but not impossible. Next position. Okay. So what's going on here? Clearly, white has a pretty monumental attack against black's king. The king is in the center. I'm already seeing a bunch of checks on this diagonal that are possible. I'm also seeing that after bishop c6, the king has to go up to e7, and this other bishop could come into a3. That looks like checkmate, but it's actually not. The knight could cover on d6. Okay, so first idea I see, what if we take the knight to try to go bishop c6 and bishop a3? That's not going to cut it, because then black's going to take back with a pawn, and the c6 square is all of a sudden going to be protected by the queen. Those kinds of things rarely work. When you sack your queen to, to make some flimsy sequence work, the position's going to change. It's like the butterfly effect. Something's going to change, and then the entire concept is not going to work. So let's go back to the initial move. Bishop c6 check. That seems like a good place to start. King up to e7. Okay, so I think I've spotted a mate. One idea that I came up with is to capture this rook with a queen. And the idea is to lure the king back to d8 and then advance the rook up to b8. And that's sort of a rook and bishop kind of construction that's familiar to me. That forces the king back to e7. But then there's a problem. So let's go through that again. Bishop c6, king e7, queen takes d8. And again, if you have a board nearby, I won't set up these positions on chessbase, but you can absolutely set this up on a board nearby and follow along. Bishop c6, king e7, queen takes, king takes. Then this rook slides up to b8. The king escapes to e7. And initially, I thought that rook e8 was checkmate. But it's not. The king can evacuate to d6. Do we have at our disposal a means of covering that d6 square? We do. Remember that early on I mentioned the idea of bishop a3. So what if we throw that move at exactly the moment when the king goes up to e7? The knight will have to cover, and then rook e8 is actually checkmate. Because the knight, I know that's a lot of arrows, but the knight is going to be pinned by the bishop on a3. And the bishop from c6 is going to defend the rook from the king's capture. So once again, bishop c6, king e7, we take the rook. We go rook b8 check. The king goes back to e7. Then we throw in bishop a3, forcing the knight to deprive the king of its last escape square. The queen on f6 stops the king from coming to f6. Then rook e8 is made. Not too difficult if you are well acquainted with mating patterns. But nonetheless, that's a pretty long variation. Boom, boom, checkmate, 2900. That sounds about right. Yeah, that first one was a false positive. Okay, so here we have another... I guess what chess.com basically claims is that these puzzles that have mate in 1 or mate in 2, it's so tempting to make another move that they believe that it obscures the obviousness of the mate, but I don't really agree with that. Here, I think it's just a mate in 2. We start with bishop g3 check. That's the first move that comes to mind, and after king d2, that knight on g5 is hanging, but if you just sort of look at the whole board, if you force yourself to look at all areas of the board, you'll immediately see that the correct move is queen takes d4 checkmate. And you have to train yourself to do that. When there's a hanging piece or there's a hanging pawn, you can't limit your search to that square or that piece. You have to look at the whole board. You have to put things in context because often you'll have a much better way of attacking. Okay, that was easy enough. We can definitely do a couple more, 1 or 2 more. All right, this one seems pretty juicy. All right. So let's unpack this. Well, white's down a piece, first of all. First thing I see, white's down a minor. But the black king is clearly in danger. So I see, for example, we have knight h7 check. We have knight e6 check. In fact, knight e6 check wins black's queen. And I think that's a move a lot of people would go for. But what's the problem with that move? Again, it's all about not missing the forest for the trees. After bishop takes c6, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, count how many pieces black has for that queen. Black has a rook and 2 minor pieces for the queen. That's more than enough material. That's not going to do. right? That's a very, very common mistake when solving these exercises, is to go for the line that wins a queen without realizing that, you know, you're giving up a kingdom and a horse in return for that miserable queen. So I say we scratch knight e6 and we go for the other check, knight h7. Let's look at that move. I think black has to take the pawn on f7. King e7 just seems unthinkable. And I think the hard part of this exercise is going to be to find a follow-up to knight h7, king takes f7. Because we have a bunch of different tempting checks there. We have rook f1, we have queen up to d5, we have rook f2, and, you know, teasing out which of those is the most promising is going to be a pretty monumental task. But let's get to it. Knight h7, king takes f7. First, I'm going to take 30 seconds or so just in silence to get my bearings. So there. I have a pretty good sense of what I think it is, but I just want to verify that. Yeah, that looks like it. Rook f1, g8, rook takes d7. Okay, so I'll share my thoughts. Knight h7, king takes f7. The first thing I saw was this rook f1 check. That seems very natural, right? Just bringing another piece in the attack. The king is probably going to go back to g8. I don't see any other good squares. Then if you look carefully, you'll see that the queen x-rays the king. Okay, for this one, I actually think I'm going to set this up in chess base, and then I'm going to switch scenes. So this is going to take me a second. Again, I will specifically not edit this out. I want to show you what the process looks like. This is not something I would normally do, but there's a lot of intricacies here, and I want to make sure that I'm explaining them clearly. So this will just take me a hot second to set up. Pawn here. Got to make sure I'm not missing any pawns, or else we'll have a mess. Okay, there we go. And let's see if I can seamlessly switch scenes. Yes. Okay, this works. For me to get something technological to work is like a monumental achievement. We have the board. That white part on top is generally where the names of the players go, but here we don't know who's playing, so it's left blank. All right, so knight h7, king takes f7, and now I'm thinking about rook f1. Now, why am I saying that the king has to go back to g8? Because I'm intuitively ruling out any king move along the e file. I feel like if the king goes back to e8, we're going to have checkmate here. It might be in 2 moves, it might be in 3, but it's no question that a king on e6 is going to be checkmated by the 800 pieces we have surrounding it. Not even knight f8, which I mouse lift, is a good move. That says a lot. So king g8 is forced. Now, I saw that the queen is x-raying the pawn, and so the move knight f6 came to mind. But again, this is another case of tunnel vision, because, okay, if queen takes f6, then rook takes f6, and one could argue that black does not have enough for the queen. Black has only 2 minors for the queen. So the king has to move. And then we could take this bishop with our rook. But this creates a fork. We're forking the queen and the mate threat, but the queen could slide over to f8. Very annoying move. And I don't see a follow-up. We have maybe a discovery with the knight, but look at our king. Our king is also very weak. The queen is threatening to come to b4. I don't like it. So rather than abandoning the whole line, I go back to the last moment at which I had a choice, which is an advice that I've shared before, and that would be this moment. Do we have to go knight f6? Well, when you have one of these sequences, like knight f6 and rook takes d7, that's 2 moves. You should always check what happens if you switch up the move order. So what if we start with rook takes d7? See, the point here is that the queen doesn't have f8 anymore. That square is now covered. Black could throw in rook b4 check, which was concerning at first, but I think the king just hides on a1. And that's it. Black is out of checks. Black has to take the rook, and now we go knight f6 and knight takes d7, and we have a queen for a rook and 3 pawns, which is borderline convincing, but also I would say that black's king is really weak here. So we're threatening rook f7 and rook g1. This is completely winning. I think there's no doubt about that. So I would say that that is the likeliest solution. I didn't really check for other options. I mean, maybe a move like queen d5 is interesting, but I feel like this is really messy. Black has bishop b6 and king e7. Black has all these options. King g6 has to be considered. Rook f1 is by far the most forcing move, and those are the moves that you should start with, even at these highest level problems. Let's go back to the other scene, and just give me a second here. we go. And let's attempt a solution. Knight h7, rook f1, rook d7, and that is correct. Knight takes d6. See, that was 29:42, but I would say that was perhaps our hardest exercise. And I think that's a good exercise to stop on. Now, I could do more, and I think that I will definitely do subsequent videos. I think this went pretty well. I think I'll do subsequent videos where I solve more of these exercises. But I think you get the point, hopefully. And I also hope that you enjoyed these puzzles. As you can see, I was pretty close to getting some of them wrong. Some of them involved a little bit of guesswork. I was stumped on the second one. But this is what it looks like. I'm still making observations. I'm still doing the same calculation. It's just that, as I said before, the level of observations that you have to make, the stuff that you have to look for, that gets a lot more complicated at this level. But it doesn't fundamentally change, and so you can absolutely go on chess.com and attempt this level of exercise, even if you're a beginner or an intermediate player, and hopefully you'll be able to see that you can solve some of them correctly, and those that you can't, you can always learn from and try to understand what observations you fail to make. That kind of stuff is really helpful, even if a little bit dejecting at times. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll definitely be making more of these in the near future. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.